The Kari were the oldest known species in the galaxy. For millennia, they ruled the stars, untouched by war, untouched by fear. Every race they encountered either submitted willingly or vanished quietly. Fear to the Kari was a primitive notion, a concept they believed only undeveloped minds entertained. They had eradicated fear from their genetic code, perfected logic, and mastered psychological equilibrium. But all of that changed the moment they discovered the transmission from Earth. It was a simple, garbled signal, ancient by their standards, but it carried something deeply disturbing: laughter, human laughter. Raw, uncontrollable, maniacal. It wasn't the kind of laughter they'd come to understand from other peaceful species. It was twisted joy at chaos, the kind that echoed during moments of destruction or pain. They replayed the clip 1,000 times in their great halls, debating its meaning, analyzing its tone, frequency, the slight background noises. No other species laughed like that. No other species enjoyed fear. The Kari decided Earth had to be observed. They sent a scout ship, cloaked and silent, orbiting just outside the moon's shadow. What they found disturbed even their most emotionless analysts. Humanity wasn't a race of peace. It was a race that had grown through pain. They thrived in conflict. They evolved through war. And worst of all, they had survived extinction multiple times and kept smiling through it. The Kari delegation watched historical records, mushroom clouds devouring cities, trenches filled with mud and blood, humans clawing through disaster after disaster, often turning on each other just to survive. One Kari scholar asked, "Why do they keep going?" The answer terrified them. Because humans didn't need a reason. They were chaos, wrapped in flesh, logic buried under layers of raw emotion and sheer willpower. And then the Kari made their second mistake. They initiated contact. A formal broadcast was sent to the leaders of Earth offering a diplomatic alliance, cloaked with subtle warnings. A test of compliance, disguised as goodwill. But Earth didn't respond the way the Kalari expected. The message was intercepted by a civilian hacker who leaked it online. Humanity didn't react with fear. They reacted with memes, mockery, laughter again. The message was dissected and turned into jokes. Surrender to the space elves. One meme read with a poorly drawn alien holding a white flag. Another featured Ari's ship photoshopped into a fast food logo. The Kari panicked. Their advanced minds couldn't comprehend this reaction. Diplomacy had always brought submission. They increased their efforts, sending ships closer, deploying stealth drones across major cities, trying to understand this volatile species before war became inevitable. But humans noticed, not through satellites or radars, through instinct. Soldiers began to report sightings. Civilians uploaded blurry photos and shaky videos of weird triangles in the sky. The internet buzzed with theories. And somewhere deep in a mountain, a group of humans in black suits took interest. Project Thanos, long dormant, was reactivated. Kari drones were hunted. One by one, they were shot down, dissected, and reverse-engineered. And when the Kari finally realized what was happening, it was too late. The terror they never believed in had already started to bloom. Their ships, undetectable for centuries, began vanishing without a trace. The high thinkers of Kalar convened for the first emergency meeting in over 10,000 cycles. The topic was unthinkable: the human threat. They wanted to evacuate their observation outposts, but something had already gotten inside. One by one, their mind-link systems failed. The last transmission from an outpost orbiting Mars sent just 2 words in panicked binary. They're laughing, and then silence. The Kari, for the first time in their existence, didn't know what to do. They had studied fear like a theoretical concept, but now in the face of something they couldn't predict, couldn't control, couldn't even understand, they felt it. Real, raw, paralyzing fear. The Kari high thinkers, once serene in their eternal calm, now whispered with a tremor in their synthetic voices. They hadn't known panic. Their minds had been conditioned against it, calibrated for efficiency and clarity. But fear was no longer a theory. It had become a biological memory, rekindled by something ancient, something primal, and it was human. They're laughing. The final message from the outpost played in a loop inside the Great Core's thought chamber. Hundreds of Kari minds linked into one collective stream, trying to make sense of the impossible. A young analyst, barely 500 years old, attempted to speak, but found himself disconnected by the elder stream. Interruptions were no longer tolerated. The hive mind was spiraling into something it had never known. Doubt. Commander Zellier, head of the observation armada, finally broke the silence. We made a mistake. Humanity is not a species that evolved through harmony. They are forged in chaos. An elder responded, "Chaos is unsustainable. All species must find balance or perish." "Then why?" Zellier replied. "Are they still here?" Silence. Kari had encountered aggressive species before. Predators, dominators, destroyers. All of them burned fast and bright, and died just the same. But humans were different. Their aggression wasn't just for territory or survival. It was personal, emotional. They fought for ideas, illusions, for pride and spite and vengeance. And they never stopped. On Earth, things were changing quickly. The disappearance of satellites, unexplained EMP bursts, and rumors of black helicopters became too loud to ignore. World governments knew something was up, but they didn't know the scale. Only a few within a deep shadow agency known as Aegis truly understood. The Earth was being watched. No, studied. And humans do not like being studied. Within a month, the world's top militaries had formed a clandestine coalition. Tech recovered from fallen Kari drones was already being reassembled in a cold Nevada hangar. Engineers reverse-engineered gravity drives and cloaking tech at a speed even they couldn't explain. Scientists, spies, and soldiers, people who couldn't stand each other, now worked side by side. And over them all, Project Thanos loomed like a specter. Its directive was simple: make first contact on our terms. But humanity didn't want peace. They wanted answers. They wanted control. And above all, they wanted revenge for being treated like animals in a cage. As footage from the drones became public via data leaks, the response was explosive. Protests erupted. People stared at the skies differently. Now the veil of normally shattered, and something even darker began to rise. A man named Mason Thorne, a disavowed ex-CIA officer, now heading a private military group called Red Apex, began recruiting. "We've been tested," he said on pirate radio stations. "They wanted to see if we'd kneel. I say we teach them what kneeling costs." Mason's broadcasts spread like wildfire. Underground labs began weaponizing alien tech independently of government control. Fringe scientists, survivalist militias, even rogue nations began assembling their own defenses. The world was splintering, but for the first time in human history, they all had one thing in common. The enemy wasn't each other. It was the Kari. Back in the orbit of Jupiter, the Kalari Council's fleet hovered like a silent fortress. They observed the chaos on Earth, expecting humanity to destroy itself. That's what inferior races did when confronted with the unknown. But this wasn't destruction. This was consolidation. The Kari didn't understand it yet. But humans weren't unraveling. They were coalescing into something far worse than an empire or a resistance. They were becoming united. A new signal reached the Kari observation fleet. Not from Earth's governments, not from a military agency, from an open global frequency, unencrypted, spoken in a voice filled with deliberate venom. "To the Kari fleet watching us, we know you're there. We've torn apart your toys. We've mapped your orbits, and we've reverse-engineered your secrets." The signal paused. "We haven't come for peace. You watched us suffer. You studied us like vermin. And now you're going to learn something new. You're going to learn what fear tastes like." There was no signature, no coordinates, just silence afterward. But then Kari Orbital started going dark, one after another. Their long-range sensor buoys collapsed. Entire data relays vanished. Cloaked satellites, supposedly invisible to primitive eyes, exploded mid-broadcast. Onboard diagnostics found something terrifying. Each satellite had been hacked before destruction, and the code signature, human-made. The Kari scrambled to react, but their ships were not designed for panic warfare. Their doctrine was based on perfection and predictability. They underestimated one crucial flaw in their own logic. Humanity didn't play by rules. They broke them, burned them, laughed at them, and in a moment that would be recorded in the galactic archives for eternity, the humans launched the first offensive. It wasn't a direct assault. No, that would be too merciful. Instead, the humans targeted the Kalari MindNet, a subtle digital virus inserted via backdoor in a salvaged drone's data core began to spread inside the Kari neural web. It wasn't just code. It was a concept, an idea, a whisper that asked a single question. What if you're not the apex anymore? That question, planted like a seed, caused something the Kari had no defense for. Doubt in a collective society that operated on harmony of thought. Doubt was a disease. Ships stopped sinking. Commands failed. Some Kalari began experiencing something akin to hallucinations. Others shut down completely. It was psychological warfare of the most human kind. And then, Earth launched the Thanos Protocol. 5 stealth-class vessels, barely larger than passenger planes, but faster than anything the Kari had built. Pierced through the edge of Saturn's rings without detection. They carried no nukes, no lasers, just men, human commandos. And each one had been trained to use alien weapons better than the Kari themselves. Their mission: infiltrate the Kari forward base on Ganymede, upload the second stage of the virus, and leave behind something the Kari could never delete: fear. The strike was surgical, brutal, efficient. The Kalari base, once a temple of technology, became a slaughterhouse. Human operatives moved like ghosts. No battle cries, no mercy. Every Kalari was tagged and dropped with precision. Not one survived. And at the center of the command nexus, a final message was carved into the wall using plasma torches. This is just the beginning. The footage was uploaded directly into the Kari core stream. On purpose, humans didn't hide their rage. They broadcasted it. The high thinkers watched the scene in silence. No words were spoken. But for the first time in Kari history, entire clusters began to disconnect from the hive mind. Not by rebellion, but by instinct. Individuality was sprouting in panic, and that terrified them more than anything. Fear wasn't a weapon the humans carried. It was a virus they spread, and it was contagious. The Ganymede base was supposed to be invulnerable. Kalari architecture fused with ion shielding, and quantum perimeter sensors locked into orbit by centuries of perfection. It had never known an intruder. It had never considered failure. Now it was a tomb. The footage of the slaughter played on loop within the Kari's inner sanctums. The humans didn't just kill, they humiliated. The operatives had bypassed every security layer, used Kalari weapons with sickening ease, and left behind a message, not in code or glyph, but in crude, chiseled Terran script. This is just the beginning, and the Kari believed it. Inside the observation fleet's neural command bridge, Commander Zellier stood motionless, surrounded by a semicircle of shimmering thoughtcasters. The bridge was cold. Not temperature-wise. Kari didn't register discomfort like that, but emotionally barren. The usual hum of synchronized minds was gone. The network's song had fractured. Too many nodes disconnected. Too many clusters isolated. Fear had become self-replicating. "We should leave this system," murmured Thoughtcaster Vaughn, his voice distorted by a microfracture in his neural port, a scar from trying to resynchronize too fast after the virus. "We've awoken something worse than chaos." "No," Commander Zellier replied. "We do not retreat. Not now. If we flee, they will follow. They will know we can be broken. But we can," Vaughn said quietly. "We already have been silenced again." Kari minds did not argue. They debated through streams of logic, trading strings of perfect rationale until consensus was reached. But now consensus had shattered. Reason no longer had the final say. Doubt had a voice, and that voice was growing louder. Back on Earth, the world had changed. What started as a whisper turned into a roar. Nations that once warred over oil and faith were now collaborating like never before. And it wasn't because they liked each other. It was because they feared being left behind. The United Terran Alliance was born, not out of idealism, but necessity. Everyone wanted a seat at the table before the next punch was thrown, because the message was clear now. Humanity wasn't waiting. In an underground complex buried beneath Antarctica's ice, Project Thanos was growing. Scientists fused alien tech with human unpredictability. They weren't trying to match the Kalari in sophistication. They were making weapons Kari minds couldn't predict. "I don't need this thing to fly perfectly," said Dr. Rivera, lead weapons engineer, gesturing to a half-built fighter that looked more like a flying blade than a ship. "I needed to hit like hell and confuse the out of their targeting AI." Tactics were evolving just as fast. Human commanders studied Kalari battle formations, not to copy them, but to ruin them. Algorithms were written not for precision, but for chaos. Programs learned to fight irrationally, to simulate rage, to weaponize unpredictability. Earth wasn't catching up in technology. It was rewriting the whole game. And then came the event that shocked the galaxy. The humans went on the offensive again, but this time not covertly. A full assault. No stealth, no diplomacy, just raw fury. They called it Operation Backfire. A squadron of 12 human ships, each running on hybrid Kari-human tech, jumped to the edge of Kari-controlled space, not to attack a military base, but a communication hub, a planetary relay beacon on the moon of Lurus 7, broadcasting thought waves across 10 star systems. It wasn't just a relay. It was the brainstem of Kari Interstellar Command. And the humans didn't just destroy it, they hijacked it. Before the Kari could cut the signal, Earth's message was transmitted across 7 planets in the Kari system. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a montage, a video, clips of human history, wars, revolutions, genocides, civil uprisings, atomic detonations, broken treaties, battlefield speeches, and moments of devastating brilliance. Mixed in were images of smiling children, starving orphans, betrayed leaders, betrayed lovers, and madmen dancing on the ashes of cities they had burned. The last 30 seconds showed footage from Ganymede. Infrared cameras captured human operatives moving like phantoms. A Kalari officer screaming, then silence, then fire. The final frame was the same line written now in bright red earth font. "You wanted to understand us. Now you will." The Kari collective network buckled. It wasn't just about the footage. It was the emotion, the intent behind it. The Kari had believed they were studying a primitive race, but now they realized they had been studying a predator, and they'd made the mistake of poking it. Commander Zellier's fleet began receiving distress calls from colony planets, not because of human invasions, because of mass panic. Civilians were disconnecting from the thought stream. Some Kari began isolating themselves in sealed shelters, refusing to interface. Others demanded evacuation. Some began experiencing symptoms of psychological collapse. Fear was spreading like wildfire, but humans weren't done. Inside Project Thanos, a new division emerged, Black Echo. Its purpose was psychological operations, mimetic warfare, fear-seeding. They weren't just hacking networks, they were hacking minds. One of their first creations was something deceptively simple, an AI-generated voice. Male, calm, human. It was named the Whisperer. It was designed to sound just like a human interrogator. Kind, but disappointed. Curious, but dangerous. It spoke directly to intercepted Kalari networks, overriding their message relays with phrases like, "We're closer than you think. You've seen our chaos. You haven't seen our order. You should have left us alone." Fear is the only language you'll understand. Even when the Kalari shut down their relays, the Whisperer returned via dormant signals. It lived in the back of their minds, repeating phrases at random intervals. Some Kari believed it was inside their own thoughts. Many began requesting disconnection from the hive altogether. And with that, came something the Kalari never expected: individual rebellion. A few broke completely. Some began communicating with humans. Others attempted sabotage. One Kari even transmitted a warning to Earth, begging them to stop before we lose ourselves completely. But Earth didn't stop. The Terran Alliance was too far in. And more importantly, they were winning. Mason Thorne, now commander of the independent Red Apex fleets, stared at the orbital map above Mars. Red dots flickered, showing crumbling Kalari signals. "You see that?" he said to his second-in-command. "That's what happens when the Apex gets outplayed by the underdog." The officer nodded. "Sir." What if they retaliate with full force? Mason smiled. I'm counting on it. The Kari retaliated. It came with the fury of a collapsing star. 3 capital warships, each over a kilometer long, shimmering with gravitational armor and quantum shielding, dropped into Earth's solar system through a tear in local space-time. They didn't wait for diplomacy. No threats, no warnings. They weren't here to talk. They were here to erase. Within 30 seconds of arrival, the fleet unleashed particle beams on Mars' outer orbit, carving through the remains of an abandoned human test station and pulverizing 3 stealth satellites. It wasn't a battle. It was a message. The Kari were done being afraid. But they made one critical miscalculation. They assumed humanity was still playing catch-up. The first ship, Kalari Sovereign Dura, was hit with a coordinated electromagnetic disruptor pulse, one that human engineers had specially tailored after analyzing dozens of recovered Kalari neural cores. The disruptor didn't destroy the ship. It did something worse. It caused every sensor, every targeting system, every interface to lie. Kari crew members saw phantom ships on their monitors. The walls of their own vessel appeared to bleed, shift, and scream in false frequencies. A fleet that wasn't there seemed to fire upon them in perfect synchronization. In their panic, they launched countermeasures only to hit themselves. The ship imploded, not from human weapons, but from confusion. Humanity's true weapon wasn't firepower, it was insanity. The second ship attempted to flee, its commander sensing the trap, but it was already too late. Human fighters designed like jagged blades of shadow dropped from cloaked silos near Earth's moon. These weren't standard fighters. They moved erratically, using chaotic flight patterns designed by AI simulations that trained exclusively on human historical dogfights. The Kari ship couldn't lock on. The fighters used what Earth's media had started calling the Madman Protocol, a flight strategy so unpredictable it was borderline suicidal. But that was the point. No Kari could comprehend it. And in that blindness, the second warship was gutted from below. Its engine core detonated with stolen Kalari tech, turned against its makers. That left the third ship, the Valor's Judgment. It was the most advanced vessel in the Kari Navy, commanded by High Strategist Varric, a war mind with 9,000 cycles of experience. He had studied humans obsessively. He knew their madness, their recklessness, their blind aggression. He respected it, and that's why he refused to underestimate them. Disengage weapons. Fall into silence. Do not fire unless I command it, he ordered. His crew hesitated. They've already destroyed the Sovereign and the High Fang Strategist. I know that's why we wait. Let them show their hand. And sure enough, humanity did. But it wasn't a fleet. It wasn't even a ship. It was a message broadcasted in every spectrum at once, translated perfectly into Kalari and embedded with Earth's own visual history. The screen inside Valor's Judgment dimmed, and then it began. A single looping image. A human child, blood on her face, staring into the ruins of a bombed city. Behind her, laughter, not hers, not joyous. Insane laughter, the kind that echoes after something irreversible. Then a phrase carved in Earth's blunt text. We learn fast. High Strategist Varric stared in silence. They are provoking us. No, he muttered. They are teaching us. He cut the feed and activated a secure transmission line to the Kari Core Council. Withdraw immediately. The council was silent for a moment, stunned. You dare suggest? I do more than suggest. I order, he growled. The humans are not waging war. They are conducting a psychological campaign that we are not evolved to resist. They will not fight us in space. They will unmake us. They are pulling apart our logic, our unity, our minds. You would retreat from primitives. I would survive and you should too. The feed cut before the council could respond. But it didn't matter. Varric knew what was coming next. Back on Earth, the footage of the destroyed Kalari ships went viral faster than anything in history. Every media outlet, every underground forum, every dark web channel posted it. People screamed in joy, disbelief, and awe. For the first time, humanity felt it in their bones. We weren't just surviving, we were winning. And winning changed everything. Recruitment into the Terran Defense Force exploded. Private companies with deep black funding poured resources into experimental weaponry. Kids who once dreamed of being astronauts were now dreaming of becoming Kalari killers. War had become a brand. Mason Thorne, standing before a crowd of new recruits, held up a Kalari helmet. "This is what they wear when they study us," he said. "They think it protects them. You know what I see when I look at it? I see fear. I see a creature hiding behind tech, because it's never fought a species that laughs while bleeding." The crowd roared. "But you're different. You're not trained to survive. You're trained to make them remember. Every shadow they see, every signal they receive. I want them thinking one thing." He slammed the helmet into the floor, shattering it. "Is this the day the humans come for me?" But not everyone on Earth celebrated. In the dark corners of the internet, some began to question the cost. A rogue scientist named Lenora Vale released a decrypted segment of Black Echo's internal logs. It showed that Project Thanos had created something beyond memetic weapons. It had begun experimenting with emotional AI, simulations of fear, rage, grief, looped endlessly until they could be projected psychically. "Echo field devices," she wrote in her leak, "aren't just for offense. They're designed to make the enemy feel what we choose. Fear, doubt, despair. They're mind terror bombs." She was right. Aegis, the hidden hand behind Black Echo, had developed emotional payloads that could override the brainwaves of Kalari receptors. They didn't kill. They broke minds, made soldiers curl into fetal positions, whispering nonsense, made officers hallucinate old memories, made thinkers lose their minds in endless recursive doubt loops. Lenora's final warning went viral before it was scrubbed. "If we keep this up, we're not becoming monsters. We're building gods of terror. And when the Kari fall, we'll be the next ones afraid of what we've become." But the momentum was too strong. The rage too real. The Earth had tasted fear, their fear, and it was delicious. In orbit, the wreckage of the Kari fleet now floated like trophies. Human salvage crews were already dissecting it, breaking it down, studying every inch. And far away, past the dark side of the moon, a new structure began to rise. A station not for peace, not for science. A forward operating base. From here, the next move would be made. The humans weren't just defending Earth anymore. They were preparing to invade. The station was called Dreadspire. It wasn't a name voted on by governments or branded for diplomacy. It was named by the first soldiers who landed there. An unspoken truth hung in the air. This wasn't a defense hub. This wasn't a beacon of peace. Dreadspire was a spear, built into the hollowed carcass of an asteroid and wrapped in hybrid human Kalari armor plating. The station floated like a black tumor on the edge of the solar system, silent, watchful, and waiting. From its observation decks, the human race stared into the abyss of Kari space, and for the first time in known galactic history, the abyss flinched. Inside its cold corridors, soldiers trained on Zaragob obstacle courses, while engineers patched together weapons stitched from fear and fury. New experimental I ran simulations on the psychological fragility of the Kari collective, testing phrases, symbols, even colors, to determine what might break them faster. In one corner of the station, a cell of Black Echo operatives watched a wall of flickering footage. Kalari commanders breaking down in real time. Colonists self-isolating. Military formations collapsing after receiving corrupted message loops. They weren't tracking kills, they were tracking insanity. And at the heart of Dreadspire, Project Thanos was evolving into something darker. A section called Chimera Lab had gone fully dark. Blacklisted eyes only access. Rumors spread. Some whispered they were breeding something. Others believed they'd captured a living Kalari. But the truth, as always, was far worse. Chimera Lab wasn't making a creature. It was making a hybrid half-human, half-Kari, engineered in a vat, with the sole purpose of understanding fear at the genetic level. A living weapon designed not to fight, but to feel fear like a Kalari, and then weaponize it against them. Dr. Anton Selk, chief researcher of Chimera, described it bluntly in his personal log. "We're not studying the enemy anymore. We're becoming a mirror. If the Kari thought they were looking into a cage, they're about to find out they were standing in front of a cracked window, and something human is staring back." Meanwhile, the Kari homeworld of Zerkiel once a monument to rationality and peace, had begun to unravel. The core council had fractured. Some of its members refused to connect to the thought stream. Others had taken their clusters underground, physically, not digitally, refusing to speak or link with anyone outside their immediate neural families. It was societal collapse, but orderly, silent, like a cathedral being dismantled, brick by careful brick. Out of fear it might be haunted. Those who remained in power tried to project strength, issuing formal declarations of continued dominance, but their broadcasts were thin. The light behind their eyes, literally in Kari bioluminescence, had dimmed because the humans had begun speaking directly to their civilians. Somehow, through systems the Kari believed impenetrable, human messages appeared on public info feeds. Not threats, not taunts, just questions. When was the last time you slept without fear? How do you define a predator who doesn't hunt for food? If your unity was strength, why did it break so easily? Each message was simple, clean, delivered in perfect Kalarier script. And that was what made them terrifying. They understood the fear virus, no longer digital, no longer conceptual, had become philosophical. The Kari couldn't kill it with firewalls or thought stream resets. It had infected meaning. Every question seeded doubt, and doubt was their species' kryptonite. The council held an emergency conclave. Only 3 high thinkers attended out of the original 13. The rest were either dead, disconnected, or lost to neural fragmentation. We underestimated the humans, said the eldest thinker Voy. No, replied strategist Varric, now recalled from the failed invasion. We underestimated their pain. We thought suffering was a flaw, but for humans, it's a crucible. Vel's glow dimmed. Then we must consider surrender. Very turned slowly. You think they'll accept it? We surrender. We end this. We offer reparations, cooperation. Perhaps we even integrate. You think they want peace? Very's voice was a rasp now. They don't want peace. They want us to feel what they felt, to drown in it, to choke on it. He paused. And we are. Back on Dreadspire, preparations for the final phase of Earth's retaliation were in motion. They called it Ashlight. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't a superweapon. It was a reveal. For years, humanity had assumed the Kari were the apex of technology. But within the depths of ancient Terran ruins, beneath deserts, under oceans, and inside dead ice moons, fragments of something older had been found. Relics from a pre-human civilization, tools made of unknown materials, devices that responded to human thought. And Ashlight was the first working interface built using both these relics and Kalari neural tech. Ashite was an implantable consciousness, an artificial entity that lived in the user's subconscious. It could simulate emotion, predict enemy fear responses, and trigger countermeasures before they were needed. It made soldiers into living feedback loops of terror. You didn't need to think, you felt. And Ashlight acted. A squad of 25 Ashlight operatives was already active. They were nicknamed the Herod. Some called them Earth's Angels of Death. Others whispered they weren't even human anymore. Their first deployment was imminent. A warp gate near Dreadspire pulsed with energy, calibrated to fold space directly into Kari sovereign territory. Not a military target, a cultural archive. The place where the Kari kept their oldest knowledge, their myths, their original algorithms, their ancient songs of logic. Because Earth didn't want to destroy their ships, they wanted to destroy their identity. But just as the gate began to glow, a new signal came through. Encrypted low-band frequency from Kari space. A surrender request, not from the Council, not from the military, from the civilians. A voice trembled through the comms, translated into English with perfect clarity. We cannot fight you. We no longer understand how. Please tell us what you want. The room inside Dreadspire went still. Even the Herod stopped moving. Mason Thorne, watching from the observation deck, whispered, "They finally broke." But then the question rose, what now? Because the humans didn't want territory. They didn't want riches or minerals or trade. They had never wanted conquest. They had wanted something deeper. They wanted the Kari to hurt, to question, to feel less than. And now they did. So Mason turned to the Council of Earth's last true war thinkers and asked, "What do we do with a god that learns to pray?" The Kari had surrendered, but no parades were held on Earth. No fireworks, no marching bands, no declarations of victory echoing through city streets. Instead, silence took root across the Terran network, a heavy, strange silence, like the quiet after a scream that went on too long. The message was still displayed in the war room at Dreadspire, replaying every few minutes in that low, cracking voice. It didn't come from a general, not even a politician. It came from someone they didn't expect to hear from at all. A Kalari teacher. "I am Malur. I instruct young minds in logic and harmony. There are no more students. There is no more harmony. I speak not as a leader, but as a father, a brother, a creature. We understand now. We saw you as chaotic, broken. But it is we who were fragmented and blind. Please tell us what to do. Tell us what you want. Tell us how to make this end." No Kari had ever begged. Now one did, on behalf of billions. Inside Dreadspire's command chamber, the room was quiet. Not because there were no ideas, there were too many. Because now winning had become the problem. General Helena Coyle, supreme strategist of the Terran Alliance, leaned over the briefing table, her eyes scanning the message for the 50th time. "This is it," she said. "No more simulations. No more psychological warfare. They're broken." Commander Raj Morrow folded his arms. "So we accept. Take the surrender. Draft a treaty?" "No," said Mason Thorne from the shadows of the room. "No treaties, no mercy." He stepped forward, his expression carved in stone. He wasn't wearing military insignia. He didn't have to. Mason was the symbol now, the soul of Earth's vengeance. You think this ends with them handing over star maps and bowing down. Number ends when every Kari child is raised to fear a shadow at the end of their bed. When they tell stories about Earth like we told stories about hell. Raj's voice sharpened. "They've surrendered, Mason. This isn't war anymore. It's punishment." "That's exactly what it is." But Helena wasn't convinced. She stared at the teacher's message again. There was no deceit in the voice, just loss, raw and aching. "They're not asking for terms," she said. "They're asking for meaning." And maybe that was the real problem, because now humanity had a choice it wasn't ready to face. What do we become when vengeance is fulfilled? Back on Earth, the news spread in waves. Leaks, confirmations, breakdowns on live streams. Every major news anchor struggled to frame it correctly. The war was over, but the question lingered like a ghost. Had humanity won, or had something been lost forever? The internet fractured. Some called for peace. Others called it weakness. One particularly viral video featured a survivor from the initial drone incidents. An old miner named Curtis Rain who had lost his wife when a Kalari probe overloaded a geothermal station. He stared into the camera, face weathered, voice cracked. They watched her die, recorded it, didn't lift a finger. "You ask me what we want now. We want them to remember her name. Every damn day." Curtis's words struck deep. They weren't loud. They were human, and they spread like fire. Suddenly, civilians were weighing in. Polls popped up. Should Earth occupy Kalari worlds? Should we dismantle the Kari thought stream permanently? Should we try to forgive? Forgiveness. That word hit harder than any orbital strike, because that was the thing no one wanted to admit. Humanity was afraid, not of the Kari anymore, but of what they themselves had become. Back aboard Dreadspire, the decision was made. A delegation would go to Kari Prime, not as conquerors, not as killers, but as witnesses, to see what the war had done, to see if anything of their enemy remained at all. Mason Thorne was not invited. Neither were the Herod. Instead, General Helena Coyle led the mission, flanked by diplomats, linguists, a historian, and one very reluctant representative of Black Echo. The shuttle landed in what used to be Zirkel's capital, Saravaville Nexus. It was silent. No protests, no weapons, no soldiers, only Kalari civilians, thin and faded, blinking under a sun they barely seemed to notice. They didn't hide. They didn't kneel. They just watched the humans step onto their soil for the first time. Mevalur was waiting. He wasn't what the humans expected. He wore no translator device, no protective gear, No delegation robes, just a thin cloak and tired eyes that glowed like embers fading in ash. "I thank you for coming," he said. Helena nodded cautiously. "Why us? Why not speak to our governments?" Melville turned his gaze toward the horizon. "Your governments did not break us. You did. Dreadspire, Project Thanos, the Herald, the voice that whispers in our dreams. You are the ones we fear. We needed to face that." They walked through the city and saw the scars, not craters or rubble. Kari architecture was self-reaping but emptiness. Playgrounds with no children, thought hubs with disconnected ports, streets without the sound of communal links, a city of ghosts still alive. Helena stopped by a sculpture. It had once depicted a Kalari neural lattice, a symbol of unity. It was now cracked down the center. Someone had spray-painted human words across it, in trembling glyphs. "We felt you." She turned back to Melville. "You said you understand now, but do you? Do you really?" Mabel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his robe and pulled out a small device, a memory crystal. "This is what I taught children. Our earliest history, the story of how we learned to silence fear, to replace it with reason, to rise above pain." He handed it to her. Helena activated it. A projection shimmered into the air. Young Kalari sitting in perfect order, reciting logical mantras, teaching each other not to feel sadness, not to react to loss. Just accept, just adapt. "We thought that made us strong," Melville whispered. "Now we see it made us hollow." Helena stared at the children in the recording, so disciplined, so calm, so dead inside. And suddenly, she remembered something. A street in New Chicago. A 6-year-old girl in a bomb shelter, crying over her dead dog after a food riot. That girl had survived, grown up, joined the army. That girl had felt everything, and now she was standing on an alien world, being begged to teach mercy. Back aboard the shuttle, the diplomatic team argued. Some wanted full deconstruction of the Kari culture, strip them down, enforce Earth's law, turn them into clients of the Terran Alliance. Others wanted isolation, leave them broken, watch them crumble. Only one. The historian spoke softly. "What if?" she said. "We've already won the worst way possible." Everyone looked at her. She pointed to the footage they'd just captured. "They're not resisting. They're not plotting. They're not rebuilding. They're becoming us. And we don't even like who we are." That night on the edge of Zerkiel's great monument square, Helena sat alone, and Melville joined her. He said nothing at first, then finally asked, "What do humans do after war?" Helena looked up at the stars. "Build something new, usually worse, sometimes better. Then I ask you," Melville said gently, "not as a conqueror, not as a human, but as a fellow creature. What do we build now?" She didn't have an answer. Because maybe, for once, it wasn't about what they would become. It was about what they would choose not to be. The Terran shuttle lifted from the Kari capital in silence, engines humming softly against the dead wind of Zerkel's atmosphere. General Helena Coyle sat at the rear viewport, her face unreadable, eyes fixed on the shrinking horizon below. No one on board spoke. Not the diplomats, not the linguist, not even the Black Echo observer, whose eyes had never left his data tablet since takeoff. Everyone had seen enough. They hadn't walked among survivors. They had walked through a broken dream. The Kari weren't rebuilding. They weren't even resisting. They were drifting like a species that had forgotten what it meant to want something. And that terrified the humans more than any weapon ever could. "This is what victory looks like," the historian whispered as they broke into orbit. "An empire that dies on its knees and thanks us for killing it slowly." No one responded. There was nothing triumphant about what they'd just witnessed. The Kalari hadn't lost a war. They'd lost their center. They had stared into the chaos of humanity, felt its unfiltered agony, its madness, its brilliance, and discovered something horrifying. Humanity had survived not by removing fear, but by consuming it. And now that humanity had shown them terror, the Kari understood what it meant to feel truly alive for the first time. And that was the greatest defeat of all. Back on Earth, the news was received with celebration by some, but mostly confusion. There were no cities to conquer, no flags to raise, just a people who had given up. Not out of cowardice, not out of tactical necessity, but because they didn't know how to be Kari anymore. In a broadcast that was aired across all major networks, General Helena Coyle addressed the world. She didn't use a podium. No anthem played. No banners waved behind her. Just a plain gray room. And her voice. The war is over, but there is no peace treaty. We won. And in doing so, we broke something that cannot be unbroken. We taught our enemies fear, but we did more than that. We taught them to feel. And now they are afraid of what that means. So I ask the people of Earth, not what we've defeated, but what we've become. Her speech was met with mixed reactions. Some praised her honesty. Others called her weak. Social media flooded with debates, protests, calls for unity, and calls for domination. A world that had once rallied under a single flag was splitting again. Because without a clear enemy, humanity only knew how to turn inward. But something more disturbing was spreading. A quiet, growing fear that the Kari weren't the only ones who had changed, that maybe the humans had too. In the depths of Dreadspire, Project Thanos remained active, though quieter now. Mason Thorne refused to speak to media. He remained in his private quarters, reviewing footage from the Kari collapse on a loop. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just watched. The Herod, the elite Ashlight operatives, half human, half algorithm, were ordered to stand down. But they didn't return to Earth. They remained stationed on the Black Station in orbit, sharpening blades, simulating new war scenarios, watching neural feeds from across the galaxy. They weren't angry. They weren't grieving. They were ready, and that scared even their creators. Are they still human? One junior engineer asked in a debrief. His supervisor didn't answer, because they both already knew the answer. Meanwhile, on Kari Prime, a strange transformation had begun. Small groups of Kari, disconnected permanently from the thought stream. It was unprecedented, unthinkable. Just a year ago, these drifters, as they were soon called, began wandering the cities alone, speaking aloud, asking questions. Some formed small, silent circles in old lecture halls, discussing fear as a concept. Others began writing, something Kari hadn't done in centuries. Stories, not data, not equations, fiction. Tales of a race that flew too close to chaos and found itself reborn in pain. The first Kari novel written since pre-Unity was titled In the Shadow of the Laughing World. It was banned within a day. But by then, thousands had already downloaded it. And that's when the second wave of fear began. Not among the Kari, but among humans. Because fear wasn't dying, it was evolving. A quiet crisis brewed within the Terran Alliance. Young soldiers who had never fired a shot were beginning to experience phantom memories, flashes of battles they had never fought, screams they had never heard, pain they had never endured. At first it was dismissed as trauma contagion, humans processing war secondhand. But the truth was darker. Ashlight tech had leaked. Black Echo's emotional AI models designed to simulate fear, grief, rage, had been uploaded into public systems by rogue engineers. Some had been incorporated into entertainment. Others had made their way into consumer neural implants. And now people were feeling war, dreaming of it, hallucinating fear that wasn't theirs. A new term was born, synthetic empathy disorder, SED. It swept through Earth's youth like a slow virus. Counseling centers overflowed. Anti-tech activists began demanding Ashlight's full shutdown. Riots erupted in Geneva and Tokyo. Earth's victory, once so clean, was cracking from the inside. Because humanity hadn't just won the war, they had accidentally shared it. General Coyle met with a secret faction of diplomats, scientists, and psychologists. The question on the table was no longer military. It was existential. What now? What do you do when your enemy gives up? What do you do when you can't put the genie of fear back into the bottle? One soft-spoken psychologist proposed something radical, a joint project, a fusion, not of weapons or tech, but of healing. Fear, she said, is no longer a weapon. It's a language. We've both learned to speak it. Maybe now we learn to translate it into something else. Some called her naive, others listened. And soon a new mission was born. A vessel was prepared, the Aurora Mercy. Not a battleship, not a research lab. A bridge carrying Kalari and human survivors, veterans, thinkers, children, philosophers, people who had seen the war from both sides. Its destination unknown, its mission undefined. But its name meant something in every language. Light after darkness. Mason Thorne didn't board the ship. He watched it launch from a quiet orbital dock, arms folded, eyes hollow. When asked why he refused to go, he simply said, "Mercy isn't mine to give," and disappeared into the black corridors of Dreadspire. The final transmission from Kari Prime before diplomatic silence was reinstated came from Mevel Lure. He stood before the cracked Unity monument alone. "We do not ask to forget. We ask to remember differently. You showed us fear. Now perhaps you can teach us how to live with it." The Aurora Mercy drifted through unclaimed space, gliding beyond charted sectors, past gravity wells and radio ghosts. Its hull shimmered, not with armor or shielding, but with symbols, human alphabets, charaglyphs, and something new, a fusion script, a language neither species could fully read. Yet inside the ship was quiet, not dead, not clinical, just peaceful. Walls of living moss filtered air. Circular lounges gave way to meditation pools, hybrid neural link stations, and shared sleeping chambers, where silence wasn't enforced, but respected. There were no guards, no ranks. Everyone aboard was equal, not by law, but by damage. On board were 50 souls, 25 human, 25 Kalari, survivors, sympathizers, healers, one child. Their mission, undefined. Their goal, unclear. But their intention was carved into the entrance of the main observatory. We survived fear. Now we learn to live with it. The humans still dreamt in screams. The Kari still flinched at laughter. But they were trying. And for the first time in the history of both civilizations, trying meant more than power. Earth was quiet, not peaceful. Humanity never was, but subdued. The streets of once boisterous cities now echoed with caution. News feeds didn't blare victory anymore. They pondered consequences. Politicians spoke less. Artists, philosophers, scientists. Those voices grew louder. For the first time in generations, they weren't ignored. Memorials were built, not for the fallen but for the changed. Black stone towers bearing no names, only reflections. One stood in New Nairobi, another in Berlin. One hovered in low orbit. Above the Pacific Rim, an AI monument that whispered human war poems to passing ships. In the quiet that followed war, humanity looked inward, and what it saw was fractured, but still alive. On Kari Prime, the sun rose differently, not because it had changed, but because the Kari had. They still walked in lines. They still communicated through logic, but the emotion was no longer repressed. It was simply new. Some days it overwhelmed them, others it saved them. A child, young, newly linked, asked a question no Kalari had asked aloud in centuries. Why do we cry when we are afraid? His teacher, once a thought stream engineer, didn't know how to answer, so she cried with him and wrote down the experience. Later it became part of a new educational module, Fear Response 7, Fluid Mourning. Once banned, the study of feelings was now curriculum. In the ruins of Dreadspire, now decommissioned and declared off-limits, a final recording was discovered by a salvage team investigating radiation anomalies. It was Mason Thorne's last log. He wasn't seated like a general. He wasn't armored or stoic or righteous. He was tired. He looked like a man who'd finally outrun his own shadow and found it waiting. I used to think fear was something to conquer. Then I thought it was something to weaponize. I was wrong on both counts. Fear isn't a wall, it's a door. And when you open it, you let everything in. We made them afraid, and then they made us see ourselves. That's not victory. That's a beginning. The file ended there. No body was ever found. Some believe Mason walked into the void. Others think he joined the Herod, now scattered across the stars. Some say he never existed at all, that he was a myth born from war. Whatever the truth, his shadow lingered in every system Earth touched. He had shown them terror, and now terror had a face. The Aurora Mercy reached its destination on the 128th day. A drifting moon in a dead sector. No atmosphere, no life, but ancient signals. A mix of Kalari and pre-human resonance. Possibly a meeting ground. Possibly just neutral soil. They called it Cinder Rock. Here they made camp. No cities, no temples, just a shared space. They gathered around fire pits. Kari, still uncomfortable with flame, but willing. Stories were told. Not of battles, but of memories. Akari sang a song once used to calm neural surges in infants. A human read a poem written by her great-to-grandmother after surviving a genocide. One night, someone laughed just once. Everyone froze. Then Akari named Ellen Tar asked, "May I learn how to laugh?" And the humans didn't teach her the sound. They taught her the context. The first Kari laughter was awkward, choked, flat. But it was real. And that night, the humans cried. Not out of sadness, but relief. Because this was the moment the war finally ended. Back on Earth, a monument was planned. Not of steel, not of names, but of absence. A massive cube of polished black stone, entirely blank, stood in the center of Geneva, a global capital reborn. It bore no inscriptions, no plaque. People stood before it and saw only themselves distorted in the shine. Children asked, "What does it mean?" And the answer was always the same. Whatever you see. The Kari built their own version, except theirs was clear. Glass perpetually fogged by internal condensation. From a distance, you could barely see anything. Up close, your own face stared back, but never fully. And that, they said, was the lesson. Years passed. The Terran Alliance dissolved, not in collapse, but in evolution. It became something looser, more fluid, less of an empire and more of a culture. Planet states operated independently, but with shared moral architecture, an unspoken agreement born from war. Do not teach fear again, unless you are willing to become what you teach. The Kari reconnected, not with unity, but with diversity. Their colonies re-established thought streams, but now by consent. Emotions were shared only when offered, their libraries filled with fiction. Their scholars debated not just facts, but feelings. And at the edge of known space, the Aurora Mercy became a station. A small one, but permanent. Visitors came. Not many, just enough. No weapons allowed, no recordings permitted. Inside its halls, humans and Kari told stories to one another. No judgments, no data mining, no propaganda. Just raw, unfiltered humanity, and something close enough in the Kalari. They called it Jara. Not a word, a feeling. A blend of fear and awe and reverence and pain. The closest Terran equivalent soul. One final entry from the Aurora's logbook was preserved in both human and Kari archives. Its author, Talia Voss, the historian who had once stepped foot on Zirkel. We set out to make them fear us, and they did. But in the ashes of their terror, we found something we never expected. A mirror. We looked into it and saw not monsters, not victims, but travelers, lost, afraid, and still walking. In time, the story of the human Kalari War faded from headlines. Not from memory, just from noise. It became a quiet wound, not a scar. Scars are closed. Wounds remind you to move carefully, to speak gently, to build better. And somewhere in a classroom on a distant world, a Kari child was asked what the word human meant. She paused, thought, then replied, "The ones who gave us terror and then taught us how to feel it." And across the stars, a human child asked what the Kalari were, answered with something eerily similar. They were the ones we feared, but they showed us what fear looks like when it's finally understood.